Risk, the game that you played with your friends as a kid. What if I told you that there's a large competitive scene in the game?
Let's go! We won the tournament, everybody! We're the 1v1 champions of the world!
My name is OliveXC, and I am the most winning tournament player in the history of Risk Global Domination. Today, I will show you how you can climb to the top of the leaderboard in my strongest game mode, Risk 1v1s, as I make the climb to rank 1 to win my 20th title in this game. Let's do this. So what settings do we use in Risk 1v1s? We can either do World Domination or Capitals. For all maps, we tend to use Manual Setup, Fog, Blizzards, and Progressive Cards. We use Manual Setup. It reduces the amount of luck that can occur if troops are placed automatically. We use Fog, so if we go second, the first player cannot find and hit our troops. We use blizzards and sometimes portals to increase the skill level for a map. We use progressive cards because if someone gets lucky and has a 10 troop set on 3 cards, they can get a decisive advantage and use luck to swing the game in their favor. In general, small maps with less than 30 territories can be used for capitals maps, and medium-sized maps with less than 43 territories can be used for world domination. An important concept that players use when selecting territories is a disconnection map. The disconnection map is available on the Risk Forever Discord server. The color of a territory shows how many other territories that specific territory connects to. The red colored territories connect to 1 other territory, while the brown ones connect to even 8 territories. You can see the breakdown on this example map here. The number is the sum of the nearest and next nearest territories combined. It shows the overall territory's disconnection. The lower number, the more disconnected that territory is. The bigger number, the more connected that territory is. In 1v1s, you want to pick the lowest numbers possible, especially in easy-to-hold small continents. If you pick low-number territories and your opponent picks a bunch of high-number territories, then you'll get a very good setup that will give you the advantage to win the game. While disconnection is an important element of territory selection, the best players often incorporate other aspects into their strategy too. Examples include the bonuses, opponents' territory choices, and choke points. Also, these disconnection maps are assuming no portals and no blizzards on an individual map. A blizzard can make an individual territory more disconnected, while a portal will make it more connected. Always consider how dynamic a map is when making your selections. Player 1 will normally have an advantage because they will have the tempo to select the best territories. They're also going to be able to attack first, and they decide the strategy of the game. Player 2 will get +3 additional troops going second. If the game goes long, they will also get bigger trade-ins from cards. On the ladder, to get to the top 10 of Risk 1v1s, you need around a 95% win rate playing against all players. At the highest tournament level of play, against equal opponents, player 1 will generally win about 66% of the time, and player 2 will win 33% of the time. For the upcoming Risk 1v1 tournament, we will normalize this player 1 advantage by having both players play first and second equally in the tournament. Going into detail with the two main 1v1 game modes, the first is World Domination. In this game mode, player 1 has an advantage because they set the tempo with the initial selections. It is best to make selections for small bonuses first because it forces player 2 to either select the worst territory or give you extra troops with a continental bonus. For maps with odd territories, player 1 will take the last territory. For maps with even territories, player 2 will take the last territory. This gives player 1 an even bigger advantage as they can force player 2 to take the worst territory as their last selection. Those with a keen attention to detail may observe that almost all included maps in the upcoming Risk 1v1 tournament have an odd number of territories after blizzards, because this improves the gameplay between both players. For World Domination, it's very important to use the Disconnection Map to pick the low-numbered, bright-colored territories to stay spread out, disconnect yourself, and connect your opponent. If you ever don't know what to pick, a good rule of thumb is to pick the lowest number and colored territory to match it. Many maps follow the rule of 3. This means that if a number of your territories is divisible by 3, take one additional territory so your opponent gets one less troop the next turn. This is because every turn a player gets 3 troops no matter what, and then an additional troop for every 3 territories they have above 9. 12 gives 4, 15 gives 5, etc. We will go into this in more detail when discussing the most popular and upcoming Risk 1v1 tournament maps. As player 1, you should try to take a large number of territory to make player 2 get fewer troops, or to try to hold a bonus that player 2 cannot break, giving you extra troops your second turn. If you're playing on ladder and your opponent does not understand turn 1 bonuses, taking a bonus turn 1 can be a decisive way to give you an easy victory. Another common way to win as player 1 is to predict your opponent's stack. If you are right, you can hit it to have a very high chance to win the game. Try to avoid giving your opponent a continent unless it is for a strategic reason, as player 1. This is because you have to break it turn 1, and it can limit your strategic choices with what you would choose to do. As player 2, try to stay spread out and be able to hit the bonuses on the board. Try to hide your stack so player 1 cannot guess it easily. You should not give your opponent a continent, as they will get additional troops, a bigger bonus, and have an even bigger advantage on turn 1. If the game is still continuing after turn 3, as player 1, if you have a set, you should turn it in as early as possible. If your opponent, player 2, does not have a set, it will give you a decisive advantage to potentially let you hold additional territory or bonuses on the board. As player 2, you should turn in a set if you are behind. However, if you are even or ahead, it is best to wait, because as we are playing with progressive cards, you will get even more troops when you eventually turn in your set. Moving on to capitals. This mode is much more math focused. In general, you want to pick a capital spot that is connected to a large number of territories so your capital is less likely to become blocked. You should also try to select a capital that allows you to easily hold a bonus to give yourself an advantage over your opponent. These games tend to last a few turns and really require strong post-game decision play. You can simply take an opponent's capital after turn 3 to win the game. It is best not to take a capital before turn 3 unless it is a last resort. You are likely to lose more troops on the roll, and your opponent will have time to retaliate and take the capital back. The only exception is player 2 can roll a capital on turn 3 if they have a good chance to win or make a last-ditch effort to win the game. When should you roll a capital? If you are playing a ladder game and your goal is to get a high standing on the leaderboard, you should always wait to get 100% rolls. For small capitals, less than 10 troops, the general rule of thumb is to have 2.5 times the number of troops on your capital before attacking. For very large armies, you should have 2 to 2.2 times the number of troops to give you around a 100% roll. In tournament play, for the upcoming Risk 1v1 tournament, it's worth taking a cap roll if you think the odds of winning the cap roll are greater than your odds of winning the game without taking the roll. If your odds are above 50%, over the long term, you will get more points over your opponent, given that both sides will get 1 point for winning the match. Now that we've covered the high-level concepts for world domination and capitals, we're going to discuss the most common as well as the unique maps for the upcoming Risk 1v1 tournament. See the description below and the timestamps to find the maps that interest you on the ladder or for the upcoming tournament. The first map we will start with is Boston. In general, the first territories that player 1 should select include Brighton, the Neck, and West Boston City. This forces player 2 to take Alston, Bunker Hill, and East Boston City. If player 2 does not select these territories, player 1 gets a turn 1 bonus. Player 1 can then select Eagle Hill, and player 2 has to select Jeffreys Point. If player 2 does not select Jeffreys Point, player 1 will take it, and then player 2 will connect all of their territories in the upper right-hand corner. Player 1 should then select Central South Boston, and player 2 then has to take City Point. If player 2 does not take City Point and player 1 takes it, player 2 then has to connect their territories in the upper right-hand corner again. Another good territory for player 1 to take is Back Bay, which will force player 2 to take Mission Hill. Otherwise, player 2 will block themselves in the upper left-hand corner continent, or they will have to take a very bad central territory in the middle of the map. Finally, player 1 can take either the Brewster Islands or Hyde Park, and player 2 can select the other territory. Remaining selections are dependent on blizzard and strategic setup. As you move towards the end of selections, avoid the center, Andrews Square, Uphams Corner, and South End. And be careful of the territories connected to them. If the middle is cut off for either player, it can give a decisive edge for the other person to win the game. Moving on to the map facts, there are 39 territories on Boston with 3 blizzards. If your territories are divisible by 3, try to attack 1 additional territory. As first player, you will be choosing the last territory. You'll get 20 troops to start off with, plus 6 troops on turn 1, and you want to try to attack 8 territories, so your opponent will only get plus 6 on turn 1. As player 2, you will place down 21 troops. The general strategy is player 1 can take a lot of territory on the board, taking advantage of the choke points and the difficulty of accessing the corner plus 2 bonuses around the board. This can make it challenging for player 2 to access and clear the board. Player 1 can also try to take and hold several bonuses to give themselves an advantage. Finally, if player 1 can access player 2's stack, it is generally best to blitz it to get the attacker's advantage. Boards that have blizzards in the islands, the top left or top right of the board can make it very player 1 favored. Player 2 should try to break all bonuses and retake the territories. The next map that we will go over is Simple World. Your first selection in general should be your capital. The best capital spots are dependent on blizzards, but if in doubt, a good capital is always mainland Europe because it has good connections over the board and you can always try to hold the Europe bonus. If player 1 is selecting going for mainland Europe, Russia is the best counter pick. Beyond the standard capital spots, the best territories are the disconnected ones, such as within Australia, Central America, United States, and Argentina. You want to avoid the central territories like China and North Africa, as that can split the board in two. As player 2, you may want to give your player 1 opponent Australia, as they will only get 1 additional troop, but they will connect their territories and give you tempo with selecting 2 other strong territories on the board. Moving on to map facts. There are a total of 17 territories with blizzards. Player 1 will make the last selection. As the territory count is overall low, it is very unlikely that another player will get additional troops by holding lots of territory. This map has several unique strategies based on the blizzards, which can require unique gameplay and creativity to outplay your opponent. Blizzards in South America can make that continent easier to hold, but can block off your capital more easily. Blizzards in Africa are generally not impactful unless another blizzard makes it a 1-point hold. Blizzards in North America can be impactful as it cuts off into South America or Europe. Asian blizzards are very impactful, especially on China and Russia, as it can cut the board in two. Finally, blizzards in Europe are very impactful as it can create a 1-point hold for the Europe continent. Practicing various blizzard combinations and predicting your opponent's strategy is key to dominating and winning the game. Our next map is Supermax. The most important territories to select are any of the corner spots without portals for each of the cells. The most important territories to avoid are any portals, gates that lead into the cells, as well as the center of the board. Moving on to the map facts. There are 39 territories with 3 blizzards and 5 portals. The first player will choose the last territory, place down 20 troops, get 6 troops on turn 1, and in general, they should try to attack 8 territories, so player 2 will get the minimum amount of troops on their first turn. Player 2 will be able to place down 21 troops and will get 6 troops on turn 1. The general strategy is to try to take dead ends to give a fold-in area, whereas if you take bottlenecks and portals, it can block your troops from that area. You should prioritize blocking your opponent from breaking the bonuses you want to hold. You should also prioritize keeping yourself open to break the bonuses your opponent wants to hold. You should try to choose territories to minimize your opponent's good options for troop placement. This puts them in a position where they must place troops badly for you to win, or predictably so you also can win. There's a large number of mind games that can occur on this map given this dynamic relationship. Blizzards and portals make this map very dynamic, so be ready to adapt as needed. The next map we will go over is the classic map. The best territories to select are first your capital location. Then you generally want to prioritize the best territories within Australia. Madagascar is also a high priority first pick, as well as Argentina and Peru. Remaining good locations include several territories in North America like Quebec, Alaska, and mainland Europe, as well as Japan, Yakutsk, Mongolia, and Irkutsk in the upper right area of Asia. You will want to avoid major connecting areas such as Indonesia, Brazil, Venezuela, Central America, and Ukraine. Moving on to the map facts, there are 39 territories with 3 blizzards. Player 1 will choose the last territory, place down 20 troops, and get +8 on turn 1. They will place their capital down last. They should try to attack 8 territories to minimize player 2's troop bonus. Player 2 will place down 21 troops, and they'll get at least +6 on turn 1. They will also place down the first capital. Moving to the general strategy, there are 2 options for both players. One strategy is for player 1 to go for North Africa. It's a very connected territory, and your opponent must break Africa and open up your capital to avoid giving you the bonus. Another option for player 1 is to go for Siam or Indonesia and Australia. If you are able to take and hold the bonus, it will guarantee you getting +2 troops every turn for the remainder of the game. To counter the North Africa bonus, player 2 should select the Middle East, as that allows them to potentially hold Australia while always being able to break Africa. If player 1 is going for Australia, player 2 can take North Africa to counter the Australia play. Blizzards make this map very dynamic. If there's a one-border continent like South America or even North America, it is best to cap inside the continent to guarantee that you are able to hold it. As this is a large map, the easiest strategy for player 1 is to take a large amount of territory and make it challenging for player 2 to take an equivalent amount of territory on their move. Finally, it's common for player 2 to have to split their troops between their capital spot and an ancillary spot to guarantee breaking all the continents that player 1 may choose to go for. Up next is France. Viva la France! The best territories to select are the corners of the various continents on the board. When you take the corners, they're least connected, and if your opponent takes the center, they will connect everything. Moving on to the Map facts. There are 24 territories with 2 blizzards. Both opponents will start with 12 territories. You're going to want to end your turn on 13 territories at least, so your opponent has 11 or fewer territories on their turn. Player 1 will make the second to last selection. They will be placing down 28 troops. They will get plus 6 troops on turn 1, and they're the first person to place down their capital. Player 2 chooses the last territory, which gives them a little bit of a disadvantage. They will also place down 28 troops, get plus 8 troops on turn 1, and they will place down the second capital. Moving on to strategy. If Blizzard's in the corner, the best strategy is to cap in the center bonus. You can also try to be tricky and cap in the bottom right bonus, feel your opponent cannot easily access it, or in the top bonus. If the map is open, where there is no singular continent that gives a player an advantage, player 2 is generally favored, as they will have equal opportunities to block bonuses, and they will get bigger sets over time that they can place on their capital. If Blizzards block southern France, it becomes a 1-point hold for player 1. The best option for player 2 is to try to cap in the 2-point hold continent in the adjacent area, or place troops within the continent, hoping player 1 cannot break it. If Western or Eastern France becomes a 2-point hold, that is generally the best location for player 1 to cap. Blizzards in Upper Normandy or Champagne can make Northern France a potentially good bonus and capital spot as well, as it is harder for player 2 to break there. As player 1, the goal is to try to end the game quickly, as player 2 will get an advantage over time with trade-ins. As player 2, you can try to take an early hit if you feel player 1's advantage is going to grow. If you feel that you are winning or feel the game is equal, it is best to wait until the late game. The next map we're going to go over is Roman Empire. The best territory to select first is Britannia Inferior in the upper left-hand corner, as it is a 2-territory bonus. Player 2 must then select Britannia Superior, which is a little less disconnected. You'll then want to take the least disconnected areas on the board, such as Germania Inferior, Achaia, Corsica, etc., that I'm highlighting right now. Another common theme to keep in mind is with the Provincia 4 region, there are patterns for certain territories to take. I am highlighting these patterns on the board right here. You're generally going to want to avoid selecting the territories in the middle of the board, as that can prevent you from accessing both ends depending on player 1's strategy. On this map, there are 40 territories with blizzards. There's 3 blizzards and 5 portals. Player 1 will pick first, and player 2 will unfortunately make the last pick. That makes this map very player 1 favored. This map does not follow the divide by 3 rule. Instead, it's a 3+1 rule, as you can see with the chart on your left. The general strategy, as since player 1 forces player 2 to take the last territory, it can be easy to have a lock on either the left or right hand side of the board to own bonuses, forcing player 1 to make an easy guess for a potential stack hit. Player 2 can potentially counter this by having multiple stacks to hide in around the board. If there are blizzards, cutting the map in half or making potentially the right or left hand side a 1 or 2-point hold, player 2 should try to prevent player 1 holding that bonus, and player 1 should try to block off player 2 during territory selection. The next map we're going to go over is a very big favorite on the ladder. USA World Domination. USA. USA. In general, the first territory selection player 1 should make is New York, and player 2 has to select Southern Mid-Atlantic State, as this is a 2-territory bonus. When blizzards leave the map open, player 1 should then select North New England, as it's the most disconnected area, and player 2 then selects Central New England. The remaining best territories to select include Texas, Florida, Michigan, Utah, Washington, North Dakota, etc., based on this disconnection map. The most important territories to avoid include Montana, Missouri, Illinois, Tennessee, Kentucky, basically the middle of the map. You want to be able to access both sides of the board, and the most connected territories are located here. Moving on to the map facts, there are 39 territories with 3 blizzards. Player 1 will pick the first and last territory and will place down 20 troops, getting +6 on turn 1. They should try to either do a stack blitz or to attack 8 territories on the first turn to give player 2 11 or fewer territories. Player 2 will place down 21 troops and will get at least +6 troops on their first turn. The reason why this map is so popular on the ladder is because it's one of the most balanced maps. Player 1 can either try to do a stack hit or take a large number of territory to put pressure on player 2 to retake that territory. With open blizzards in non-important locations, it's common for games to last several turns and players to reach the card trade-ins. If there are blizzards on the left-hand side of the map in locations such as Montana, Arizona, or New Mexico, the Pacific Coast is a 1-point hold. Player 2 should try to prevent player 1 from holding that bonus. If there's a blizzard on North Carolina or South New England and Mid-Atlantic also becomes a 1-point hold. Always remember, avoid taking territories in the middle until the very end to play a balanced game. Up next is a new map for the Risk 1v1 tournament, Dicey Trajectories. In general, you want to select the dead ends. Territories like Gold Belt is a natural, pure dead end, but keep an eye out for blizzards, which make this map very dynamic. You want to avoid selecting the portals and highly connected territories, such as time dilation. You also want to be aware of choke points created by the blizzards, as selecting these can cut off your stack from moving through that region. Avoid taking portals in front of bonuses you think your opponent can hold, since keeping that portal open and your stack open to another portal keeps you open to break that bonus if necessary. Moving on to the map facts, there are a total of 37 territories, 2 blizzards, and 4 portals. You want to attack 1 more territory if your territories can be divided by 3 + 1, as you can see with the chart on your left. Player 1 will choose the last territory, place down 21 troops, get +6 on turn 1, and they should try to attack 7 territories to give player 2 the minimum number of troops on their turn. Player 2 will place down 22 troops and will get at least +6 on turn 1. Both players want to be in a position where their stack can hit their opponent's stack in order to gain the attacker's advantages. There's a large number of bonuses, so player 1 wants to hold a bonus and player 2 wants to stop it from happening. Bonuses without a portal are particularly and tactically important, as they are easy to hold. Finally, as this is a bit of a larger map, always take into consideration the number of territories, as that can shift the balance of the game in your favor. Up next is a personal favorite of mine and one of my favorite vacation spots, Brazil. In general for Brazil, you want to be selecting your capital first, and then territories like Santa Catarina, Espírito Santo, Litoral Nordestino, and then territories within the Norte region. You want to avoid territories like Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo, Minas Gerais, or the Tocantins. Moving on to the map facts. There are 21 territories with 2 blizzards on this map. In general, you want to end your turn with 10 or more territories, so your opponent will only get 5 troops per turn. Player 1 will choose the last territory. They will place down 30 troops and get +5 on their first turn. Player 2 will choose their first capital, place down 30 troops, and get +8 on turn 1. Brazil is very dynamic with their blizzards. With open blizzards that are not impactful, it is best for player 1 to cap in Mato Grosso do Sul and try to hold the Sul region in the bottom right of the board. Player 2 should try to cap in Goiás or Minas Gerais to counter the Mato Grosso do Sul and access the Sul region. If player 1 takes a Sul continent in turn 1 and player 2 can break, it is a best practice to leave 6 to 8 troops in Sul so player 1 cannot easily retake it. In open blizzards, it is an even game with a small advantage to player 2 due to the potential of the larger trade-ins. What makes Brazil so challenging to practice against is a large number of blizzard combinations that make the map very dynamic. Some examples include Rio de Janeiro or Santa Catarina. It can actually be best for player 2 to cap in Sao Paulo to making sure that they can break the Sul region. Player 1 has an advantage with the blizzards. Another example is with blizzards on Tocantins, Maranhão, or Piauí. Player 1 can try to hold the Norte region with a 2-point hold on Mato Grosso, and then either through Tocantins, Maranhão, or Piauí. The next map we have is Nan Madol. The best territories to select are generally dependent on blizzards, as there's very few super connected territories. Try to select 1-point territories first, starting with small continents on the left-hand side of the board when possible. Taking large number of territory in the +7 bonus is also a very good option, as no one is going to be able to hold that bonus on turn 1 and it's not strategically impactful. You want to avoid areas like South Steppes, Olissa, corners of continents that are connected, basically the middle of the board. Any territory with a portal should also be selected last due to their extra connections. Moving on to the map facts. There are 39 territories on this board with 3 blizzards. Player 1 will choose the last territory. They will place down 20 troops, receive 6 on turn 1, and they should try to take 8 territories, so player 2 only gets a minimum number of troops on their turn. Player 2 will start off with 19 territories, place down 21 troops, and get +6 if player 1 takes 8 territories. At the highest levels, portals and blizzards make the map very dynamic. Player 2 will normally have the ability to hide their army easily and access the portal as well to break continents on the board. Player 1 should try to take a large number of territory to force player 2 to open up their army for a following blitz on turn 2. It's very common for high-level games to become a dance where both players try to take a large number of territories while leaving both of their main stacks disconnected from each other. Always remember, for maps like this, the game is equal if the next player starts with less than 18 territories. Once they have more, they'll outproduce the other player in troops and use that to pull up an advantage. The next map we're going to discuss is Jules Verne's Mysterious Island. At the start of the game, the player 1 would normally select South Mandible Cape, and player 2 should normally select North Mandible Cape. Player 1 will then select Cape Claw, and player 2 will select East Cliff. Player 1 then selects Granite House, player 2 selects Iron Beds, and finally, player 1 selects Slope, and player 2 will select Mount Franklin. Player 1 will then generally prioritize selections in the bottom left-hand side of the board as well as the upper left-hand side of the board. Both players want to avoid territories in the middle of the board, such as Fall Forest, Balloon Road, Coral Road, and Glycerin Creek and Pottery, as these territories are very connected and can split the board in half. Like most other maps, there are 39 territories. Player 1 has 20, player 2 will have 19, player 1 gets +6 on turn 1, and should try to attack 8 or more territories unless they're going for the stack blitz. Like USA, Jules is one of the most balanced maps in the pool and plays similarly to USA. Player 1 can try to predict and hit player's 2's stack, and player 2 needs to try to hide the stack and then attack on the following turn. If blizzards allow for a 2-point hold on a bonus, player 1 may also choose to go for this strategy. Up next is a new map for the upcoming Risk 1v1 tournament, Mother of All Boards. It is common for player 1 to select serial number as their first pick, as it's a dead end, and forces the opponent to take Drive Port. Another really good territory to select is Memory Slot, as it has a nice dead end, and pressures the opponent to break the memory bonus. Keep an eye out for forcing picks from the Blizzard, as there's a few small bonuses on the board. You want to avoid selecting portals, especially those outside key bonuses, highly connected territories, and anything that can block the important bonuses that are defined by the Blizzards. Moving on to the map facts. This map is very unique that you should be attacking one more territory if your territories can be divided by 3 plus 2. As you can see with the chart on your left, there are a total of 29 territories with 2 blizzards and 4 portals. Player 1 will select the last territory, place down 25 troops, get +5 on turn 1, and they should try to attack at least 3 territories to minimize player 2's bonus. And player 2 will place 26 troops and get +6 on turn 1. The general strategy is try to identify which areas and bonuses are hard to hold for the given blizzards and portals, making this map very dynamic. Leave some territories in those less tactically important areas to prioritize openness to the high value, more holdable bonuses on this relatively small map. If player 2 can hide their stack correctly, they can get a very powerful stack blitz on the second turn. The next map is Castle Capitals. In general, your first selection should be your capital spot, and then select the most disconnected areas, such as Bastion, the Throne, Keep, and Royal Quarters. You're going to want to avoid the most connected territories like Rand Hall, Drawbridge, the Barracks, and Archery Range, especially if that prevents your potential capital from accessing those areas of the board. Moving on to the map facts, there are a total of 29 territories with 2 blizzards. Your goal is to try to end your turn on 18 territories or more, so the other player gets a minimum number of troops. Player 1 will start off with 15 territories and get +7 on turn 1. They will place their capital down second. Player 2 starts with 14 territories and will place down 26 troops. They'll also get +8 on turn 1, and they will place down the first capital. Within Castle, the best capital spots are South Wing, Main Bailey, and Courtyard. Top players will generally favor South Wing over the other potential capital spots unless blizzards make another bonus overpowered. Territories are a bit higher than normal for a capital map here. If you can put pressure on player 2 by ending with 18 territories or more, it can make their capital weak very quickly. That can make games fast and decisive as other players need to attack more territory to weaken their opponent. Late game, it's very important to prevent your opponent from being able to access your capital, as that can cause a very large stack blitz. I would also like to pause here for a second and talk about this game on the ladder. A lot of you watching right now are thinking, wow, all the ladder is about is noob grinding and beating really weak opponents in 1v1. It's just a time commitment. But no, in this game, my opponent outplayed me in territory selection and strategy and left me in a very bad position that I had to try and overcome. This is what separates the people on ladder that can get maybe to the top 50 to those that can rise to the top. You have to outplay, outpredict, and know how to win against your opponents. This game, I think, showcases this well, which shows the prestige and ability to succeed on the ladder and make reaching number 1 so prestigious. Moving on to the last few maps, we have Dino World. Best territories are generally the one in the corners like Small Mania, Edgar, or Kororn. And as always, avoid selecting the middle territories like Visagia, Emerson, or the Canyon. This map has a total of 37 territories with 2 blizzards and 4 portals. Player 1 will place down 21 troops, placing down the last territory and get +6 on turn 1. Ideally, they want to try to take 7 territories. Player 2 will start off with 18 territories, and they will get at least +6 on their turn. Portals and blizzards make this map very dynamic. It is best to identify the strongest bonus that player 1 will go for and make a strategy to have the other player pick territory around that bonus to block them. It is normal and okay to actually connect your territory a little bit more in non-strategically important locations to give yourself access to where you need your army to access. This map is very high level and requires significant practice to outplay and outpredict your opponent. Stack blitzing is always a preferred strategy if you can force it. If you're able to hide your army next to a portal to access the map, that is always the best option for player 2. Owning confidence for player 1 is also a preferred option if blizzards and portals make that continent a 2-point hold or better. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. If you enjoyed this video, I would highly recommend clicking here. See the finals of my Risk 1v1 tournament where I got one of my titles. This is OliveXC signing off.